All right, welcome to Now This Is Podcasting. I'm your host, Connor. I'm here with former guest Calvin.
Thanks for having me back.
And we have McKinnon on as a guest again.
What's up?
Glad to have you on for this one.
Good to see you.
And we're doing another Darren Aronofsky film. We've done a couple of his. I think we probably got to get just a playlist going for him. Finish it off, maybe get like Noah and the Wrestler in eventually.
Requiem for a Dream.
Oh, that movie is tough to get through.
Yeah, that one's good. What's he working on next? I think he's the one doing The Whale with Brendan Fraser.
I am pretty confident you're right about that.
I am excited.
I want to see Brendan Fraser in more stuff. I watched that Doom Patrol, and he's like pretty much just voice acting in it, but I think Brendan Fraser should be in stuff.
Yeah. It's his story's kind of sad. I don't know if you know much about it.
I know he's been hurt on set quite a bit, and so he kind of just stopped doing movies.
Yeah, he had from what I understand, really bad anxiety, mental health issues. He just stepped away from the industry for a decade or more because of it.
I had seen back injuries and stuff, but I mean, hopefully it sounds like at least he's gotten the help he needs, and if he feels good to do movies, I'd like to see him in more stuff.
Yeah.
I am excited to talk about this. I think at the very least, Darren Aronofsky makes movies that are fun to talk about. There seems to be some kind of controversy, or there's different takes you can have on his films, and if you want to dive deeper and come up with your own theories on it, it's neat to talk about those. So I think we have a couple pretty good ideas on maybe our own different takes on what you can pull from this movie. And so that's why, at the very least, I mean, we did a podcast on Mother, and there's disagreements in that, but I like that movie because it's interesting to talk about. And I think you got something similar here with Black Swan. So I'm ready to get into this. This came out in 2010. It had a budget of $13 million. It made $330 million.
Crazy.
It
Wow.
was super successful, and I think part of the reason is when they marketed it, they showed Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis kissing, and I think you got a bunch of dude bros who would otherwise be completely disinterested in a Darren Aronofsky film who went and saw this because they wanted to see girls kissing. And I'm thankfully this movie has much more depth and is much more interesting than that. So I'm excited to talk about it. McKinnon, what did you think of this? You hadn't seen it before, right?
No, I haven't.
Okay. I remember. I think I'd seen it not long after it came out. But what did you think of this one?
I thought it was really boring.
Really?
Yeah, no, I didn't think there was much interesting stuff going on at all.
Is that because visually you didn't find it interesting, or characters you didn't find interesting?
Or action.
I thought that they laid out very early on what the movie was going to be about, so that wasn't very surprising when anything happened.
What was the movie about to you to start?
It was about a girl who grew up very sheltered and has to learn to come out of her shell by the end. Then that's it. I think in the most simplest way I could boil it down.
That's pretty simple, yeah.
That's a really, I would say, shallow take on it, because I think there's more to it, but I think you are right. I mean, that's certainly an aspect of this movie.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to hear what you guys think about it, because I'm sure I'm viewing it in a very, very shallow way. Yeah.
Right. I love this movie. I think it's visually really interesting to me. I think Darren Aronofsky does a really great job in a lot of his movies of how he moves the camera around. And for a movie that's about dancers, it's really cool to think of this as the camera's dancing along with them, and having that perspective of it moving. The camera's constantly moving around these characters, and I think it's just done so well. We had a podcast a couple weeks ago about anonymous animals, and that movie has a lot of handheld cam in it, the same way this movie does. But that movie is it's too shaky and it's too all over the place. There's not anything interesting going on. This film is so interesting, and with all the dynamic kind of movement and blocking and choreography that goes into it, it lends itself to this kind of camera movement. And that's why I really, really like this movie. It also has great kind of horror, thriller, psychological aspects to it. And like I said, it's nice to talk about Darren Aronofsky movies because there's a depth to them that make them interesting to talk about. So Calvin, what is your first impression of this?
Yeah, it's interesting that you compare it to Anonymous Animals, because it's really more of the same camera work that we see in Mother.
I more meant that as an example of one that's bad and one that's good.
Yeah, it's true. But it's interesting how it doesn't work very well here with all of the dancing. It's reminiscent of Bob Fosse, a big musical director in the 80s. That was his concept, everybody's dancing with everybody. But I love, The Fountain. We've done a whole episode on that, and that's also by Darren Aronofsky. And so I bought Black Swan on DVD 10 years ago because I love The Fountain so much. And I was you might be thinking, wow, this must be one of his favorites. But I literally have never watched it until this month. So the real reason I wanted to do the podcast was selfishly to go through my own movie backlog.
Oh, perfect.
And so mission accomplished so far. So I've been aware of this movie, and the anticipation is built for over a decade. And I'm happy to say that the payoff was worth it.
Oh, good.
What a cinematic journey into the subconscious. So many psychic elements playing out here. It's visually arresting with all of these mirrors. Oh my gosh, the number of mirrors. I've had there was one short that I filmed in school. It was actually like a triple reflection of a guy hanging himself, which, you know, I kind of had a bit of a reputation in school because I had a lot of I would always start out with oh man, this is hilarious, this is so funny, and then like halfway through like writing out my shot, oh, but what if they died?
Oh,
So
man.
yeah, I made a little sound project of this kid playing around in the bathtub. That was my idea. And I just messed with the sounds and everyone was like, "Oh wow, that was just so cool." It's just how you had everything underwater. And just so to clarify though, he drowned, right? And I was like, "No, this is just a child playing around." Oh, but it's just it's you,
Right.
So yeah, seeing things like that with all of these reflections just take me back to my own,
perfect.
my own journey. So whenever, this guy gets mirrors, that's kind of what I was thinking. So I'm very excited to talk about this film because we are gonna be all over the Jung train
I'm so
today.
excited. We haven't gone real heavy with Jung in a long time. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
excited
just
to get
throw
into it.
them. Yeah, I just throw them in here and there now because if you're
When the spirit takes you, you know.
yeah, exactly. I feel like I talk about it too much. I don't want to oversaturate our normal viewers. I don't know
Right.
who I'm talking about there, but I also don't. They're very interesting, weird concepts that a lot of people don't know. That the basis of character construction, psychic elements, psychoanalysis, why all of these things exist and the fact that they exist in the first place. So I want to be sure that everyone understands the basis of what I'm talking about and how you can interpret movies. So we're gonna be sure we really lay this out there this time because
Well,
I've listened to some of our episodes and I don't feel like I'm very clear.
I like it. I think this movie lends itself to that because there's a huge psychological element to this movie, I think.
Absolutely.
And so I kind of want to start out maybe real quick. Calvin and I have watched Whiplash. I don't think McKinnon has seen it, so we'll just have a quick conversation about it. This movie has been compared to Whiplash, at least kind of the stuff I've looked at is kind of a obsessed artists trying to perfect their craft. And I was wondering because we have a podcast we did on Whiplash, and I don't see those. I see on a surface level, I see those comparisons.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I don't find these films to be equal or mirroring each other in any way. I wonder what you thought of that.
Yeah, you do have those elements of artistic narcissism. That's a bit of what's driving a lot of these characters is perfectionism. The idea of art, you're only as good as your last piece. So the moment that you aren't at the top of your game, you're replaced, just like Beth was. That is a really, really, really shallow viewing of this film. I don't think this shares any of the elements that make Whiplash, because Black Swan is that's the surface level, but it's really not what the point of the film is. It's not what it's trying to say. It's not what any of the characters' functions are. It's all about this internal dialogue happening inside of Nina. And yeah, we'll get deep into that. But
I kind of wanted to have that as the preamble to be if you think this movie is just about obsession of a craft, that's not what this movie's about. And that's why I kind of wanted to maybe draw that link between this and Whiplash to be just to let you know this, if that's what you take away from Black Swan, I think you missed what Black Swan is about.
yeah, if you listen to our other episodes, this is Enemy, if anything. Almost not quite shot for shot or concept for concept, but so similar.
Right.
Yeah, the climax of the movie and what the movie is about are nothing alike with Whiplash. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost it's really
facetious or are you being facetious?
No.
no, he's being serious because that's it's almost redemptive. It's cathartic in the way
Right,
Whiplash ends.
Yeah.
I thought you hadn't seen Whiplash. That's why I was.
No, I mean I haven't seen it, but I've seen enough of the movie to know what it's
Oh,
about.
right. Okay. That's what I'm saying is Whiplash on the surface, you can kind of tell what this is about. I think on the surface, there's much more to Black Swan. But
I'm over here defending McKinnon. I forgot that he actually hasn't seen it. But I agree. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So yeah,
If
I
you watched
agree.
the climax of Black Swan and the climax of Whiplash and thought they were about the same thing, you were asleep the whole movie.
Yeah.
They were both on stage.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
they
just
would-
performing art, but
Yeah.
that's not what those
I'm-
movies are
They're all,
about.
they're all just nerds.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that you brought that up. That is so interesting to think how they end and how they have a totally different feel to them.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. Despite all of the blood in both of them.
Right.
Gosh.
No, I'm
So,
being
yeah.
serious.
Yeah.
No, I know.
Yeah. Sometimes I can't tell with you because you're just like, oh God, Calvin.
I just
keep
hate everything
talking.
you say. Just
Yeah, to just kind of set the tone of like what this kind of review is going to be about. I like kind of drawing that comparison or lack of, I guess, comparison between the two.
the distance between them. Yeah.
Right. I kind of want to move again into the look. What I mentioned earlier is just how well the camera moves around. It's handheld, but it's in a good way. I really like it. McKinnon, you're making a face, so I want to know, what do you think of kind of the cinematography used here?
It was distracting at first and made me very dizzy. But like Calvin said, how it works well with the dancing elements of it and following the dancers on the stage and circling around them and stuff like that. It works very well for that. And after a certain point in the movie, it was less distracting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree because actually, like that was my going into this. Because we talk so much about how like good Ari Aster's films are because of this cinematic quality of his camera movements. We don't have a lot of handheld stuff. But that's a big hallmark of Aronofsky films is because it's all of these psychic elements. It's all like Requiem for a Dream is just like madness overtaking drug users. The Fountain is the madness of life in general.
Right.
Mother is the madness of a world and a Christian God. Like all of it is just about like handheld cameras work so well to create this unease, like you're there and you're unsettled. So when I first came to it, I was like, I don't really love it because it's like, because we talk about how much more fun it is to, in a cinematic sense, to have these big long slow shots, and moving away from it. Like there's a little bit of baggage with handheld cam now in terms of it being like a party trick.
Right.
you
Like
know?
like when there was that big fad of like found footage movies that all seemed to come out like after Cloverfield. That was like the big thing.
Right.
Which
yeah.
that's more like shaky, but it's like there's a lot of handheld elements to it.
Yeah.
It's gimmicky, I think.
Yeah, it feels at times like it was gimmicky. I would rather see a few more shots where the camera's just completely still, because whether or not like anything's happening in frame or whether the camera's necessarily moving, the edges are still moving in such a way you can tell that they're holding their cameras. Again, this was shot just like Mother. It was shot on Super 16, smaller cameras, more maneuverability, that grainy texture. So I got over it a little bit more, and I just embraced that Aronofsky aesthetic because I think you need to do that.
I think that if you look at movies and you're like, I can't really tell the difference between directors, like they all just look like movies to me. I think watching this or any other Aronofsky movie, like watch Mother or something, if you can get through it, and then watch an Ari Aster movie, and I mean, I'm not saying it's night and day, but you can tell like these directors have a style. Like there's a distinct difference, I think, between the cinematography between those two movies. And so I think if you want to have like an exercise in like learning the difference in film techniques and like different directorial staples, this is like kind of that handheld cam, like that Super 16, like that graininess to it. These are all like staples of Aronofsky movies, I think.
Yeah.
And then like that really long, kind of slow moving, wide shot is like a real big staple in Ari Aster films. So I do think this is an interesting movie to, if you want to compare it and like try to figure out like styles and like staples of directors. Comparing those two, I think would be a really good place to go to.
Yeah, especially when you talk about editing, because Aronofsky is famous for his hip hop editing. So cut. Requiem for a Dream had 2,200 cuts. A normal film has 700.
Wow.
Midsummer had 3, I think.
There's actually 4 in the director's cut.
Oh, is there?
But yeah, so like these two things he really loves, fast cuts and handheld cameras, and they really work for the stories he's trying to tell.
I think so too, and especially for me, like I hate handheld cam mostly, and the fact that this totally worked for me, I was shocked by, because I think Calvin and I had talked before. We were like texting or something. You're like, "Did you like watching it?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's great." Like, You were like afraid I was going to be super critical of the handheld stuff.
Yeah,
I
of
thought
just
it
that.
all totally worked.
It's funny because like that's like a hard thing to get over in this film. If you do not like it,
Right.
It's funny that you say that McKinnon, it was distracting for you at first and a little nauseating. The fact that it became less distracting, it's almost like you can see its purpose.
I can, yeah. I would have liked to see a version of the movie without so much shakiness. Like maybe that would remove, if the camera work was more smooth, I'm sure it would have removed a lot of the tension from scenes.
Yeah,
It adds to kind of the unstableness of Natalie Portman's character, I think, too.
absolutely.
The kind of constant sort of anxiety and like shifting she's going through. I do want to talk about the sound. A lot of the score it's just taken from the actual Swan Lake, like the musical.
Tchaikovsky.
Yeah,
Tchaikovsky is the one that did Swan Lake.
right. And I do really like that a lot. I think this movie only works if you have like orchestral music in it. I think you can't really. There's like one scene where they're in a club and there's hip hop music. Other than that, it's all orchestral, and it makes perfect sense in this. And I think it all fits in really well. It's not ever overdone, and like there's some good spikes in it that I like really add to the emotion of the scene. And
Yeah.
I think it all works really well. Like for me, for it being a score I totally expected, based on kind of what the content of the film, the ballet and all that. It's like you expect to hear that, but I thought it all made sense. I mean, I was never like, oh, boring score. I was like, oh, this works really well.
Yeah, and it's funny. Clint Mansell is the one that did the score for it. He's done a lot of Aronofsky's films. He wasn't nominated for the score because it used too many refrains from Tchaikovsky.
I can kind of get that. I mean, it's certainly, and I think that's part of why it works for me is because it is Swan Lake,
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that all that's used in. But I do understand why he wouldn't get nominated because
Yeah,
it's
they
just
literally
someone else's
disqualified
music.
him for
Right.
it. Like not even it wasn't even like an artistic like, oh, that's not true music. No, they were literally like, no, not enough of that is original for
Yeah.
you to be nominated.
They disqualified him for plagiarism.
Almost basically, yeah.
Huh.
The thing is, I wouldn't describe this as a ripoff or anything. I don't think I'm certain that it wasn't like, oh, I'm trying to pass this on if it's my own original work. But
There's like obvious inspiration from something though.
Yeah.
Not even obvious inspiration. Like it was literally like we just like updated some parts of it, took parts of the original suite and then put them into his own just to fit the action that's going on within the scene.
Okay.
So it literally was like
Copy paste.
yeah, copy paste, but it was also like we can't nominate you because you did that.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
like,
okay.
yeah, I get
technically, it's not really your music.
it. Yeah.
Which I get. But again, I think it all works. It'd be weird if you didn't do something like that. So to have Swan Lake, a movie about Swan Lake, essentially, and not have any of the
Yeah, if you didn't
refrains
have
or
any Tchaikovsky, it's really weird.
yeah, it would be odd to me. All right, so moving on from the score, I want to circle back to the mirrors. We kind of briefly mentioned it, but it's like such a big part of this movie.
Yeah, so I mean, it's in almost every shot. It's mirrors on top of infinity mirrors. Like this film has a lot to do with artistic narcissism, like we mentioned. So it's a conceit of the narcissist seeing themselves everywhere. But they literally, like mirrors, literally create duplicate images. So obviously, the major idea of this film is duality, duality of black and white, of chastity and seduction, persona and shadow. So the mirrors work as visual representations of the unconscious churning behind the persona as well. So conscious and unconscious, black and white, Nina and Lily. So Aronofsky continually creates these set pieces to emphasize and re-emphasize and overemphasize this point. This whole film is simply one giant pattern repeating itself, and it's just because all of the mirror, like you can't really escape your mind. That's
Right.
That's kind of the whole point of it, is you're constantly seeing everywhere. You're constantly affecting the world around you, and you can't get out of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, just like to list a few. I mean, Nina's room has a couple mirrors in it. Obviously, the dance studio is full of mirrors. There's Lily and Nina are in the bathroom together. There's a big mirror.
Yeah.
A mirror with whore written on it.
Which I love. That one I feel like is actually, I don't think anybody wrote it. I think it's a reflection of her own guilty conscience.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I like
so
that.
so that's more mirror stuff there. There's mirrors in Tomas's studio room. There's mirrors in his house. There's mirrors on the subway.
There's one. It's the scene where Nina's mom is trying to give her the cake. There's actually a real quick spot where you can see one of the cameramen is in the reflection of the mirror.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
That's
For how many mirrors are in this? The fact there's only like one slip up in it, I think it's kind of amazing.
I was looking for it a few times because I was like, they have to slip up somewhere.
Just once.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you guys not think it was overdone?
No.
I picked up on the mirror aspect like pretty quickly, and I was like, could we please move on?
No, because it's not. So it's the idea of the mirrors as well, but it's also the fact that it's just really, really visually interesting. I love that part. Nobody plays with mirrors because, with the cameraman,
difficulty of the camera work.
difficult.
it's very difficult in order to always set things up so that they're only in the place where you can see your actors or your set and none of your equipment and none of your crew.
Of course.
So the fact that they're just everywhere is so much fun from a concept for set pieces. And so to see things like that, it's just a little treat for me.
Yeah, I like it a lot too because I think this movie focuses a lot on like Nina and identity and like who she's becoming and like the changes, and so like having that constant reflection of like trying to figure out who you are. Like that's kind of the part of the mirrors that I took from it. It might be a little more surface level, but I think that's
No, I think that's
identity is a big role in this film.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's a good. That's one way that they work, and that's why they don't feel overdone to me. Is because like all Aronofsky things, they don't work in just one way. They work in multiple ways because that's the way. Like his films are reflections of the mind, and everything is messy within a mind.
Okay.
I want to move on to the characters. Nina, played by Natalie Portman. I want to get into her more like when we go to theories because I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on with her character. But when I think of her kind of just base level, it's just kind of maybe like sort of like a coming of age story is what I like to think of. How she starts in this film and how she grows later on. And I just think there's a lot of interesting evolution in her character. What did you think of Nina in this film, McKinnon?
Nothing significant. I thought she was really boring.
Wow, this is nutty because I just think there's so much to this movie.
I think they, like I said earlier, they explain really early on what the movie's about. So as she starts to break out of her shell a little bit, like bit by bit, it's not surprising and you expect it to happen. And I didn't think that any of her actions were particularly interesting.
So does part of that come from the fact that you don't like Natalie Portman as an actress very much?
If it was any other actress that I liked more, I don't think it would change my opinion.
Oh, so like Jennifer Lawrence.
If it was, yeah, exactly. No, I don't think it has to do with Natalie Portman as an actress. Because, okay, so we were talking before we started recording about Natalie Portman, and her performance kind of works well for this movie because she often doesn't emote too much, and she's very bland in her performance, and that kind of fits well for her.
Very meek.
For the first portion of the movie where she's supposed to be timid and in her shell of her like sheltered existence that she's been in up to this point, and that fits well for Natalie Portman.
I think I was saying that it's like she fell into a role that like suits her perfectly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's not necessarily like
which is totally a backhanded compliment.
I know, kind of, yeah. But I mean, it's funny that you say that every like award she was nominated for, like she won that year, like all the best actresses.
I don't get it. Calvin, were you were talking more positively about Natalie Portman, right?
Yeah, I love Natalie Portman. Yeah, she's a great actress.
Okay. You'll have to explain to me why.
What are your thoughts on her portrayal of Nina in this film?
So Nina is such an interesting character, and I absolutely agree with you. Like it's really like, it's funny that you say coming of age. But I think of it more as coming of mind. But coming of age, I think, comes into the aspect of like all of the pink.
Right.
Oh, pink, so pretty. The
right.
Pink cake, her little pink shawl. And then she, I don't think we see her wear pink again after she puts on the black dress when they go out to the club. After that, because otherwise she's in white the whole time. So then it's black and white as she shifts back and forth between both persona and shadow. Nina is neurotic, obsessive, compulsive. All of this is being driven by her poor relationship with her mother. And we'll get into the idea of negative mother archetypes in a little bit later on when we expand more on like our theories and things. But that's really what's driving all of the tension in the film is Nina is a complicated mess inside of her mind because of her terrible relationship with her mother, and also quite possibly because of her father. Like here, like we kind of, you can kind of think of Thomas as being like a father, but in a postmodern sense, the archetypal father is different. It contrasts in the Victorian idea of the father, like the Victorian father being domineering, strong, kind of overbearing.
Right.
Whereas here in the postmodern, we have this idea of the absent father, and so
sure.
she is moving, like attaching to him because he is a father type figure, but he acts in a few different ways. So it's all of these things as Nina is interacting with these characters that can also be thought of as reflections in her mind. And we'll start to flesh all of that out more. But I think what's most interesting is all of like her scratching, her
Like picking at her nails.
her
picking at her
habits,
nails,
yeah.
all of those things as physical drivers or physical indications of her negative mother complex that can, they can be thought of as like borderline personality disorder. They can be thought of as just pure OCD, all of those things. And I think it's interesting to see them in relation to like the flesh of like a swan,
Yeah.
we think of that as like, it's like the shadow, like she's trying to scratch out the shadow because but her mother is like, there's a lot to go over there, but Nina is interesting for those reasons.
Right.
So you mentioned briefly, Calvin, her outfits, like when she wore black to go to the club. Did you guys think that was too on the nose? Like every time she wore black or gray or white, it really felt obvious what they were trying to say. They're like, oh, she's developing as a character. Did you guys think that was too obvious?
No,
I didn't.
Okay, I thought, I was like, come on, man. Like, could you be more subtle, please?
it's supposed to be, because the thing is like the way a good story is created is you have things that are obvious. You also have things that are subtle, and so he's giving you very obvious over heavy-handed ones. Like this is like the thing about that I think about with Mother is the subtler ones aren't necessarily as obvious as the big obvious ones. There are smaller elements here that are subtle, that aren't as confusing as in Mother. So you lead your audience saying like, here's Nina, she's wearing black, or here's Nina, she's wearing white, here's Lily, she's wearing black, and then she puts on the black, like, part of it is like the idea of going out and having like a black slip or a black top, generally being more sexy than, something in white. So there's
Sort of like that innocence and everything associated with white and all that. So
yeah, exactly. So we have all of that baggage coming with it anyways. So to lead your audience in the obvious ways so that the subtler ones become more obvious as well is, that's a weird way of putting it.
It's very confusing. Okay.
But that's why I don't find that one obvious, because there are much more subtle ones that he's alluding to by dressing them in white and black.
okay. I think the more obvious stuff is just how the character is changing in general, like the way she acts is changing. So like what she's wearing is not like that big a deal to me, because like if you're just watching the movie, you can understand the change that's taking place anyways. So
Right. I think you can understand the character is changing because her actions are changing, and also wrapping her in clothing that reflects her mood and personality as the movie goes on is excessive to me.
okay.
You should also look at the clothing of the other characters too.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really the thing, because Thomas is also wearing white and black a lot. That's really interesting when you think about the whole unconscious of Nina coming together, and we'll explain why that's important with Thomas later.
Yeah, and the mom only wears black, I think.
She is mostly,
Yeah.
I do kind of want to talk about the mother a little bit more. I like the controlling, manipulative dance mom from hell. Like, and it's so much more than like, this is so embarrassing. I used to watch that show Dance Moms with Hannah, and so I know way too much about that show. And they're like, it's like all played up for like reality TV, and there's like that element to it. But like the way the mothers in this, played by Barbara Hershey, she's like really emotionally manipulative in this. I think the most uncomfortable scene to me is the scene with the cake.
Yeah.
And she wants to celebrate Nina getting like the part as the Swan Queen, and she doesn't want the cake because she's like, oh, my stomach hurts for him. She's like, fine, I'll just throw it out, like it's useless.
It's garbage.
Yeah.
Then.
And then, and Nina's like, no, it's okay. I'm sorry. And I think you kind of get a lot of that. I got like real vibes from Midsummer, where, where Danny's like, she's like, feels like she needs to apologize for all this stuff.
Yeah.
There's some of that, like,
don't go. I'm sorry.
Yeah. There was like elements of that, like, make me really kind of feel for Nina as a character and just how manipulative the mom is. And so it's not just like a crappy reality TV dance mom. It's like, she's actually like really, there's like a really evil kind of quality to how she treats Nina. And I think like, I like that character and how she's played. I think the performance is really good in it. So then I want to talk about Tama more. And I like to think of him as, if I want to like kind of think of an archetype, I like to think of like maybe like the old man kind of shows up and she's trying to like get approval from him. Like she's seeking attention from him. And like, I actually like your take on him kind of being the absent father a lot more than what I came up with. And so I'm excited to kind of like dive into that more. But I think just kind of, I do like the idea of like this kind of seeking attention, and like she's this figure that she looks up to and trying to get that approval, because he's kind of like Fletcher from Whiplash. This is like the only other comparison I can make in that way.
Yeah.
Is where he walks in and he's like touching people on the shoulder, to tell like who's not making the cut, and then the people he didn't touch, like he wants to see them in the studio later. And Fletcher kind of does the same thing where he just like immediately knows like who's good and who's bad. And so I guess like that's like the one kind of comparison to Whiplash I have. But I do like the idea of like he's such an expert of his craft and to just walk in and be like, oh, these are the dancers I want. I think there's like a sort of like this mythical quality to him. Like he's so he's so knowledgeable and he's so good at his craft that he can just like it takes a couple seconds for him to pick out who he wants.
But it's also, and I also like how it's kind of abusive, because it's leading their expectations into the negative. Like you would think that being touched would mean like, oh yeah, I see you, I understand you, you're one I want. And for that to actually be the reverse is...
I love that they flipped that on its head. That's as soon as he's like, oh, the people I didn't touch, like I want to see you at like 5 o'clock in the studio. I was like, oh man, like all the girls who were all excited thinking that they got picked, and then to be like totally like undercut and let down. I think that's actually really neat. It establishes like this power dynamic that like he has as the director,
Yeah. So there's so many, Toma can really be thought of in two different ways. Obviously, what's on the surface is him being, a narcissistic, abusive, and incredibly charismatic director. And he clearly abuses his position for taking advantage of girls. Because, even Nina's mother says that he's been known, to have his ways.
Right.
And
right.
So I think it's interesting because that is one aspect of him that is very obvious, but it's almost like he utilizes all of his abusive sexual power on Nina in service of opening her eyes. Like it's really more of like, God, just like figure it out, man. Like I don't want to have sex with you. I don't even need this. It's just like, this is the part of you that you are keeping shut. Try and open yourself up to it. Since you're not even putting yourself in a position to find that, I need to lead you there.
Right.
Do you think Tama is her father, Nina's father?
No, we'll get into that though.
Oh, sneak peek. Okay.
Yeah, I would actually describe him as her animus.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say I figured Tama was more of the teacher, like that sort of archetype. But hearing you guys talk about the father, absent father, I think makes more sense for that character.
Yeah, and mostly because of how we've established there being a mother in her life and how there isn't a father. So the fact that this is a sexual relationship as well is what makes this interesting. So we'll get to that though.
Okay.
Yeah. Do we want to move into maybe some you?
Oh, let's all aboard. I love having my
McKenna made such a face.
What was that?
Oh, have you not? Well, clearly someone hasn't been listening.
That's us hopping on the Carl Jung train.
Oh my gosh, all aboard. Let's do it.
We do it often enough that we needed to prepare all of our listeners.
It was really fun to make the soundbite for that.
Great, yeah. Let's get into it, I guess.
Like each time I laugh, I laughed the first time, and then the second time we were recording, I laughed like really hard because I didn't hear him say Carl in it. So like Connor was like, wow, you really thought that was funny. He's like, because I didn't hear the Carl part. He's like, oh, you didn't hear the Carl part. That's the whole reason I chose it. So yeah, we're jumping on the Carl Jung train.
Great.
So Carl Jung, psychoanalyst, Swiss psychoanalyst, contemporary of Freud. So I think like this part will be very obvious to a lot of people because we all have some experience or concept of poor parental relationships. But the main focus of this section is how we create characters with believable idiosyncrasies. And archetypes provide a template of behaviors that exist in all forms of storytelling. And Jung takes that a step further and ascribes the archetypes found in humanity's folklore to represent specific aspects of the human psyche and created an abundance of literature on his thoughts. So there's a chicken and egg discussion to be had about all of our Jung references within the framework of film, because some filmmakers do specifically use his psychological concepts in their creative process, and sometimes Jung's analysis simply lines up because the way we tell stories hasn't fundamentally changed for millennia, and he just identified patterns.
I think I kind of touched on that with our Jaws review, and kind of I know this isn't Jung, but like I talked about like the hero's journey, and like I think Jung just kind of, like I think we've talked about before, he just like established and like gave us like the framework for these archetypes. Like all these stories have always existed, like you just said, for millennia. And like Jaws is the hero's journey, which has existed forever. So yeah, it's
again, what those stories say about the creators of them,
right,
generally. And so we can think of the creator putting themselves into these characters, and if the creator puts themselves into these characters, they can be thought of as aspects of one single mind, one unconscious mind. So this section should be taken with a grain of salt, though. But I still think it's a fun exercise to analyze the basis of character construction through the lens of Jungian psychology. And as opposed to my interpretation of Enemy, I think there are two stories being told here: the drama within the company and the drama within Nina's mind. So we need to pay special attention to scenes where Nina is alone or only with a few characters, because the more intimate settings give room for a wider range of interpretations. So the main archetypes we'll refer to are the mother archetype, the father archetype, and the shadow. So the mother archetype being her literal mother, and the father archetype being Thomas, and the shadow being Lily. So the mother is like all relationships of mother-like individuals, moms, grandmas, aunts, are personifications from the great mother, representing all life through symbols such as earth. The mother shapes us. It's the most important archetype as far as Jung is concerned, because it's the first relationship that we develop, and as well as some misogynistic baggage that women are specifically designed, developed for caretaking. Thus, the positive relationship with one's mother creates individuals with full range of emotional capacity, whereas a negative experience creates individuals with a mother complex, and that's what I referred to earlier. As what Nina has. Women with a mother complex can express their psychic dysfunction in ways that include an exaggeration of one's maternal instincts, so that their role of caregiver becomes who they are as they sacrifice their individuality on the altar of motherhood. That's pretty much Nina's mother. She's like completely given over to being a mother and doesn't have a sense of her own self. It's all living vicariously through Nina. So other variations of this include an antagonistic relationship with the expectations of their mother, so seeking out disapproved marriage partners or sexual relations. So you can see that with Nina, with Tom and Jerry, and
right,
obviously with Lily as well. And also carving out a sphere of their own, in this case, outdoing her mother as a career ballerina. So we can think of Nina's mother as a pure mother archetype, because I don't think she exists.
Yeah, I do like that theory a lot, because I sort of think you can look at a lot of the characters as like different aspects of Nina, and so like maybe kind of this neurotic obsession with like becoming a good dancer. I think that's aspects of the mother.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's like being projected out. So I do like that theory a lot. I didn't think about it until like we had talked about it earlier, and you were saying like, I don't think the mom's real, and I was like, ooh, I like that a lot. What are your thoughts on that, McKinnon?
I hate that, because you could say that about almost every character in any movie, couldn't you?
That's literally what Jung is saying.
I'm sure.
That's the whole point. That's why like this is something to be taken with a grain of salt.
Right.
Sometimes we can just tell stories like Shawshank Redemption, and sometimes we can think of things that need to be expressed by a creator into a story, and they all come from one mind generally, or a collective unconscious mind. That's his idea. That's where that's why all of these archetypes keep coming up, is because we keep telling these stories, and they keep being ingrained into who we are in our own unconscious. So that's the whole point, is that you can say that about everything in all stories, because that's what's happening. That's how we create stories. Is that true? Probably not. It's just like we're very formulaic in the way that we tell stories, and we enjoy, and that's also like biologically, that's how we develop to communicate, is through stories. That's why our memories are best, where our best memories are created in stories and experiences, because that's really how language developed, and that's how we dealt with the world, is through the idea of narrative.
Okay.
So that's why these things are important. That's why you can break them down this way. It's not the only way. It's just, I mean, look at how much fun I wrote, how much fun I had writing all of this down. So it's very much, I find it very much fun. So
Do you want to jump into Thomas?
So yeah, let's talk about like how all of that negative mother impresses upon Nina, and Nina's scratching, and all of those things are expressions of her negative relationship with her mother.
Yeah,
so
like
this
the
thing exists.
physical manifestation of
Her
it, right?
external injuries.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then let's talk about Thomas, because that is Thomas is really interesting in so obviously she doesn't have a father. I say obviously because they're sitting in front of the Nina's fixing her shoes with the lighter, and she talks about like her life and basically being raised as a single mother, or being a single mother. I think that was that was pretty heavily implied with that one line. So we can just say that Nina's mom doesn't exist. So it's again this this negative, or this absent father in the postmodern. And there's also this idea of what this creates is father hunger, and this yearning for that figure in their life. And it's interesting to think about like that in conjunction with eating disorders, and how that's just so fascinating. Like trying to be sexually appealing, like building a body that is sexually appealing to males, by restricting,
Right.
and because they desire the thing that they don't have, and they're always hungry. So that's a weird concept I came across looking at this. But
No, I like that a lot, because I do think there are parts in the movie where she starts out with an eating disorder because she's like, it seems like she's seeking that attention, she's seeking that approval, and then when she starts to get it, it doesn't show her like, you know, in the bathroom stall, like puking or anything like that, and then later on in the film it feels like she's like Lily's getting more attention than she is, and like that eating disorder returns. So I like how they use that in the movie. Like again, more that like kind of physical manifestation of like what she's going through emotionally, or like psychologically.
yeah, exactly. And then so Thomas works in this way also of being her animus, and the animus is the collection of all male traits of the female unconscious mind, which would include her father. It's usually the animus, the first image impressed upon a young woman is the image of their father, and vice versa for the male mind. Men usually their first image of their anima is of their mother, and then it's just this collection of all female or male, whatever the opposite gender stereotype images of the individual. It becomes a collection of those. So, and what I mean by it's the animus is because Jung thinks of the mind as being split into conscious mind, which is our persona, it's what we show, and then the unconscious mind, which is split into three parts: the anima or animus, the shadow self, the parts of ourselves that we don't acknowledge, don't show, generally the darker parts of ourselves, and then the true self, which is the deepest part of our unconscious. And so the goal for Jung is for all of these elements to be united in harmony. And when someone is disharmonious. You have someone like Nina, who has a really strong mother complex, has shut out her shadow, and her animus is it expresses itself in a very sexual way. It's very low and undeveloped because we don't have a lot of full-fledged ideas of dealing with other men. So Thomas works in such a way that he is a guide to the unconscious. And that's why he doesn't ever actually take advantage of her, is because you can think of all of his attempts at seduction as just means to an end of showing Nina, this is your shadow self. This is all of the things that you are keeping hidden away, and you have all of these problems because you don't acknowledge that they're there. They exist whether you want them to or not.
I think it could get really creepy. Like when you first suggested him as like the father figure, I was like, well, but like it seems like he's coming on to her, and I was like, that would be kind of gross. But if you really look at a lot of the scenes, like he has her over to his apartment for like a nightcap or something, and he's not really trying to have sex with her. He just asks her, he's like, do you like sex? Like, how do you even feel about it? And it's like you said, it's supposed to like kind of open her up and have her like kind of realize parts of her shadow self and all that. So I actually kind of like the idea of her being him being the father, because it's not like a sexual relationship between them, I don't think. Like while there is like, he's like, oh, seduce me, and like, but that's more like develop yourself as a person, not like literally seduce me, like there's not a romance between them.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that part lands a lot better for me when I think about it that way, because otherwise it's kind of creepy and weird.
Right.
But when you think about yeah.
But that's why I'm saying, if you can think about like what actually happens in those scenes, it's not really like romantic or sexual, really. It's like that's the subject matter, but that's like not the purpose of it. Yeah. It's not to like get laid, What do you think of that, McKinnon?
That scene was kind of why I identified him as like the teacher, because he's trying to like educate her and get her to open up as a dancer and improve. Right. Kind of like a teacher would.
Yeah, it's all inner dialogue, and that's why this film works so well, is because then, and again, because it's this, you can almost think of Thomas as being the mirror, showing Nina the other side. Like, this is what you look like. This is just your persona. You need to go deeper and find your shadow, and that's where Lily comes in.
He like essentially says that. He's like, if I was only casting the white swan, it'd be yours today. He's like, but you need to show me your black swan. And it's to develop her and everything.
So yeah. Thomas isn't the father or the teacher archetype. You would say he's the mirror archetype.
Now you're
always coming up with new archetypes.
I really hope you guys talked about the shark archetype when you did Jaws.
You're so
oh
right.
My God, we totally missed the shark archetype.
We have to re-record.
Totally missed that.
Great.
Oh, man.
Well, maybe we'll put it in the thumbnail. The Sharketype revisited.
Right.
Great. So I do want to move on to Lily now, and essentially the shadow self.
But I do want to say a couple of the lines that are really interesting that Thomas said is, it's really fucking hard to be both the white swan and the black swan. And that's because the idea of individuation is really fucking hard. Most people just ignore their unconscious mind. And this is really why I love film, is because it exposes what's in your mind. And so if you think of film as that, as an expression of what's inside one person's mind, like, oh, I kind of identify with some of those things, what then you can do is self-reflect on yourself and realize, wow, there's a lot of junk in my mind. I should really work on that, because if I'm identifying with some of these character traits, it's because I haven't done the work on myself.
Right.
Yeah. And so so one other line that, so it's just like, so yeah, exactly. It's that whole thing with Thomas telling Nina, that's like really Thomas is the most important character in the whole film, not even Lily, because Thomas is leading Nina to the thing that's going to lead her to, or is going to tell her.
Like opening those doors,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
No, I agree with that.
That's interesting. I think Lily is much more important than Thomas.
Well, let's move on to Lily then. She's like got this really cool swagger about her. Like that's the character played by Mila Kunis.
Yeah,
and
it feels like Mila Kunis.
Yeah, I guess Natalie Portman was pretty much the reason she got the job. Is she told Darren Aronofsky like, oh, I think she'd be really good in this, and they're friends. And I guess Mila Kunis just did like a Skype interview, and then she got the job like right there. She didn't actually audition for it, but I think it works perfectly. Like the first time she's introduced, she walks in and he's like, oh, go ahead and grab a warm up. She's like, I don't need it.
Good.
You know, and she's like, she's in the bathroom, like taking her panties off. You're like real carefree, and I think it does it. Like she has a lot of these aspects that I think are things that Nina kind of wishes she had, or like, you know, if it is the shadow self, it's parts of her that she's just not expressing. You know?
Yeah, she does nothing the same way as Nina.
Yeah. And I do think I think McKinnon, you probably think it's a little on the nose to have them be like so opposite, but that's the point of the movie. It's to kind of show this like development and like how she is changing.
Yeah, no, Lily is obviously the shadow self, right?
Oh yeah,
It's
absolutely.
incredibly obvious.
Yeah, like if you didn't need if there's only one psychic element that you pick up here, it's very obvious. And that's what I mean about why some of his things are very obvious. Is the shadow of Lily is very, very obvious, but it's not the only thing going on psychically with Nina. It's just a clue that more is underneath the surface.
Lily isn't real, is she?
She is real in some places and not in others. That's why also you keep seeing Nina see her face reflected in other people.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of like her mind, like her shadow everywhere. It's a bit of her narcissism, her obsessive compulsive. It's really just to unsettle the viewer and show you that something is very wrong with Nina.
Interesting. I would have thought that Lily was not real at all.
Yeah, really
part.
anything going on inside of her apartment, not real.
Okay.
Yeah, like the going out to the club, like that's real, but I think that sequence stops being real when Nina gets into the cab.
Yeah.
And like after that, it's just like, Lily just stayed at the club and that's it. So like the sex scene isn't real because then the next day, Lily's like, "What are you talking about? Like I wasn't there with you. Like I didn't go to your apartment."
Yeah, you had a Leslie wet dream.
Yeah,
about me. Yeah.
Speaking of the club, can we talk about Sebastian Stan? Like best performance I've ever seen.
Yeah.
He is in this
I
movie.
forgot. Yeah, he's in it, isn't he?
I thought, it took my breath away. His performance was amazing.
The 2 minutes he's in this movie. You can't go wrong having Sebastian Stan in your movie. Though.
He's so dreamy.
I didn't even recognize him, actually. I just saw it in the credits. I was like, where was he?
Yeah.
Where was he?
Right. Yeah. I don't think there's like the aspect that Lily brings to the movie, I think is like fairly obvious. So I don't think there's like a ton to dive in besides recognizing that she is just this shadow self.
Yeah.
And then, it's kind of cool to like look through and figure out like, oh, when is she real? When is she not? Like there's a scene where Nina walks in on like Lily and Tomal like making out and it's like some sexual encounter. And like, that's not real, but it's kind of cool to go through and like kind of pick those out and, even discuss
It's
like
really, her animus, like the jealousy of like her animus making out with her shadow in an attempt to make her jealous.
Yeah.
Like this is what you could be. You could be a full individual. Like that's the way I read that scene. Is it's not necessarily them hooking up or being sexual. I mean, it is that. It's like, look, I'm interested in her sexually because she's a lot more attractive or like a lot more
fun.
More fun. Yeah, she's really given over to those things that you're holding back.
Yeah.
So it's both things playing at the same time. In the real world, like, look at, she's the black swan. If you want the perfect performance that you want, you need to be her as well. And so it's that jealousy that's going on within her own mind even.
And then there's like the scene later on where Nina kills Lily, and stuffs her body away. I kind of have some issues with that scene. Not so much that it happened, because I kind of like the idea of like,
just like the lighthouse.
Yeah,
You can't kill your shadow when
right.
Yeah, when Robert Pattinson kills Willem Dafoe, and you realize that it was actually him all along.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was him and Willem Dafoe were one person. Like you can't skip the process of incorporating your shadow. You can't kill it off and get rid of it. You have to incorporate it, understand its power, and take that away. So and blend it into your entire mind.
Assimilate it.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Those are the words that I'm looking for. Thank you, McKenna.
Because I like a lot, because it's right before that is when she does dance the Black Swan. And that's like my favorite scene of the whole movie. Like I said, I love the camera work in it, and then just like she's slowly growing the feathers, and I love when she like at the end she's bowing and like she's got her wings out and everything.
I did like that.
It's such a good scene.
The fluttering of the sound effects.
Oh yeah. Everything.
The stretching of the goose pimpling skin.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Everything comes together wonderfully in that. And then there's like the killing off scene right after that, and I was like, I thought we had already kind of, with that dance, I thought you've already established that she is like now realizing that she can accept parts of her shadow self, and she is becoming like she has evolved enough as a character. Like she danced the Black Swan, she did it, and then to have her also kill off that shadow self at the, like right after that, I thought was totally unnecessary.
Does she not kill Lily and then do the dance, or is it the other way around?
It's the other way around because remember she does the dance and then she goes back into her studio, her little dressing room, and she checks for the blood.
Okay. This movie was too boring for me to take notes, so I don't remember.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's interesting to think about how it's a bit of that narcissism. Like look, I danced the Black Swan. I don't need my shadow anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
Rather than,
You think that's what they were going for?
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the thing. Like, oh, I don't,
Like, I'm better. I'm
better
above
than
you.
Yeah, I'm above you now. Even though it's an aspect of herself, and that's really why that's why she actually stabs herself is because it's a self-inflicted wound to think that a part of your mind doesn't need to be a part of you.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's literal? That she really did stab herself?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
yeah. I think that's just like, well, I mean, she's bleeding, so.
Yeah.
Whether she tripped or fell or something was going on, like clearly she injured herself. My only problem with that is the fact that we go back in and see that it's not real,
Yeah, I guess that's more it. Yeah.
because we don't need to see that. Like we can just see her bleeding out on the I'm sure maybe there was some test screening somewhere like, oh, I don't understand. Like, yeah, you're not meant to understand. Like just say it's perfect and like that's fine. It's all about her neuroses and how when she gives over to those without incorporating all of the elements of her mind, you're really just hurting yourself.
Right. I still like the climax of that movie is great. I think it's done so
Wonderful.
well. I do want to get into kind of one of the theories, kind of the what I take away from this movie, what I kind of think it's about. I really think it's kind of a story of a girl like going through like puberty and all the hormones and all like the unrest and struggle and anxiety. Like Nina starts out like we talked about, like she's got this really childlike voice and she's like, oh, so pretty and pink, and she's got all the stuffed animals in her room. And then as she starts to like grow up, it's sort of like she has a crush on the director, That's like I kind of think of that as like the first crush and the awkwardness that goes along with that. And like then she has a scene where she is gonna go and like masturbate, and he's like, oh, it's like kind of that like own self-discovery and sexuality that shows up. And then later on, like the jealousy and kind of nervousness she gets about Lily getting more attention than she is. And so it's like kind of that, it's just like all of the struggle and hormone and all the uncomfortable things about growing up. I think this movie does a really good job of telling that in like a really neat way.
Yeah, a really sexually charged, uncomfortable way.
Yeah, which I think makes sense because that stage of your life is so hard to go through. I mean, there's so many things, not just like mentally you're changing, but like now your body is also changing. You're becoming an adult. You're going to kind of start to become the person that you will be. And I like that struggle that's going on with her. I really like the idea of like I said, coming of age, but I also think it's like your sexuality coming of age. Like how do we develop that as we get older, as we're going through puberty and all these different things.
Yeah. And
I like that aspect a lot.
Did you see some of the swans in her room? Like there's a black swan stuffed animal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's like some swans in her bathtub.
In the bathtub, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cool stuff. There's a lot of great imagery in this.
A lot of fun stuff.
If it's a story about puberty for her, does it make sense for her to kill herself at the end? I feel like that makes it difficult for that to blend into the story well.
I think that's part of what Calvin is saying that Darren Aronofsky does, is like, this is not just one story and that's it. I think that there are a lot of elements that, like, I don't think I'm wrong for having like that theory or taking that idea away from it.
Don't worry, I also don't think you're wrong.
Thank you. I really like Calvin's idea of like the absent father and like the overbearing mother, and I think that this movie, that's why I think Darren Aronofsky makes such great movies, because you can pull so many cool ideas out of it and they all seem to jive. Like I can believe that is part of the movie. Maybe it's not the only function of the movie, but I really like coming away with this and being like, oh yeah, going through puberty sucks. And it's
totally.
really awkward and there's a lot of struggle in it, and I think it's conveyed in this movie.
Yeah, totally. I like that take I like that take. That changes the end of the movie if you look at it at that light. Like, what does her killing herself mean if it's a story of puberty? Is this too much for her? Is she overwhelmed and she just has to end it all, or something like that?
That's a much darker take. I stopped mine there before that.
And that's also like the point of Swan Lake, though.
Yeah.
I mean, on a visual, on just like a literal reason, she kills herself because she is unloved. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you could think of the fact that Thomas loving, dying for the love of the audience. Like that's really the thing. Like she's so given over to that that she becomes the literal personification of the story. She wants to be perfect.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like that's also why I think he is such a controversial director, is because some things are given more attention in certain places, hit with other people than they do other ones. I mean, despite the fact that he's always referencing like sexually charged themes and biblical themes, which a lot of people don't really like. A lot of people don't like Noah, even though from what I understand, it's fairly biblically accurate. Like Noah is not like a good story about a good dude. It's pretty messed up in some areas, and he, from what I understand, it was fairly literal. But that's controversial to some people, which is crazy if you don't know your own book. But that's the thing. It's like,
Oh, you mean controversial? Like Christians thought it was controversial?
yeah. That's kind of the thing. It's
We
like,
need to do a Noah.
yeah, we need to
podcast.
do. I bought all of Aronofsky's movies now, so I have all of them. So we're just gonna indulge my fantasy of getting through my backlog.
Yeah. I think I'm ready to move into final thoughts. McKenna, what do you think of this one?
Final thoughts?
Yeah, final thoughts and
Do you
rating.
have other thoughts?
I had one more thought.
Okay.
So I mentioned earlier that I thought that this movie was a little heavy-handed. Did you guys not get bothered by the fact that Thomas basically outlines what the movie is about very early on?
No, I don't, because it's layers. It's layers upon layers, and sometimes we like to make I think like a story that hits the first, that someone can digest the first time through. You need lines like that. Like Enemy was one movie that I needed to watch 2 times through and then still be frustrated and then look up some more of the archetypes about what's going on. When Thomas does things like that, there are still all of these other elements that I can discover, but I still get the gist of what he's trying to say. So that's why I'm okay with that.
I agree with that. I think having one element of your story be obvious is not a problem if there is, like Calvin said, if there's layers below it that you can like discover and find out there's more substance to this movie than just the obvious narrative. So that's why I don't have a problem with like explaining like that this is just it's Nina going from the white swan and discovering the black swan. Like,
Okay.
I don't have a problem with that because I think there's so much more going on. Like what we just talked about Jung for 30 minutes. So there's clearly more than just that story. And that's why I don't have a problem with like an obvious element to it.
Okay. It surprised me that they had a character just lay out pretty early what the movie was going to be about. So as Natalie Portman evolved, I was like, oh, well, if she's doing all these actions so far, she's going to kill herself by the end. And then it's not a surprise to you. So it made me think about The Lighthouse and how that movie would have been really terrible if one of the characters outlined very early what the movie was going to be about. And then by the end the movie happens, you're like, okay, none of that surprised me.
I think it's fine to know the story. It's all the stuff that
Perhaps, yeah.
happens along the way. It's the character developing through the story that is
Sure.
what's interesting. It's not like the literal narrative itself is not the interesting part.
Yeah, it's really more a bit of a foreshadowing.
Fair,
instead.
yeah. We've watched many movies where there was a mystery, and it was like an onion I had to unwrap and see layer by layer.
Yeah.
This I felt like had less layers.
Narratively, yeah, you're right. It's exploring like the more psychological aspects. That's where the layers are at.
Okay.
That's that's what I think. But how many feathers do you give this one?
Out of how many?
I don't know. What's the average amount of feathers on a swan? No, I'm just playing. Out of 10.
3.5, 3.25.
Okay.
Wow.
That's really
I really didn't like that this movie laid out what it was about, and it wasn't a puzzle for me to solve like The Lighthouse was,
Right.
or Mother, or
You keep comparing this movie to The Lighthouse, which is one of the best movies ever made. So it's tough to.
Yeah.
No,
it's true. I see what you mean.
I imagine this movie is trying to say something, and many movies don't try to say something. And movies like The Lighthouse or Mother or Under the Skin are movies that are trying to be not very clear, but they're supposed to make you think. And this movie really didn't make me think. The characters were very obvious archetypes, and I didn't have to ponder it. Like I said, I didn't take many notes on this. It wasn't something that I had to sit down and mull over for days.
Okay, no, that's fair. I mean, that's not like like I said, I think there's a lot of takes you can have on this. 'Cause
Yeah.
he makes controversial movies. So
I think it's
I
interesting.
don't think any of us are going to have the same rating.
Certainly, I think it's interesting to view it as a puberty piece. That's an interesting take I didn't come to.
I'm glad I could throw that out there.
Yeah.
Calvin, what do you where do you put this movie at?
Yeah, so I would say like it's all of the psychological stuff. It's the camera work. It's the cutting, the Aronofsky aesthetic, and all of these beautiful mirror shots. It's just a wonderful film. I think it's slightly better than Mother, so I'll give it an 8.9 feathers.
Okay, I definitely think it's better than Mother, but I do too. I love this movie. Because I hadn't seen it. I don't think maybe. Like I saw it a little after it came out, and I don't know that I had revisited it since then. So I was like, I really liked going back and watching this, and there was so much extra stuff that I certainly didn't grasp the first time I went through it. I really like kind of the idea of self-actualization and self-realization in this movie. I think those are like, it's cool to have both those aspects in it. All the psychological stuff I think worked out well for me. Like we talked about all the layers to it. The score is great. I talked about the film work I think is awesome. Yeah, so I think I probably put this at an 8. I really like this movie, and Darren Aronofsky is totally growing on me. I think he's becoming one of my favorite directors. Despite me not liking Mother, I think there's still a lot of interesting stuff in that. And Black Swan, I think, is like of his movies I've seen so far, like this is my favorite one for sure.
More than you didn't like The Fountain at the beginning. You said that grew on you, but you probably
that's what I'm saying. Is there's something about his movies that it's like I like even Mother. We started out and I was like I almost don't want to talk about it because I don't like it. And then I ended up kind of putting it like as a middle of the road movie. So I mean that even grew on me.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Is like his films are just so deep, and when I watch them, I get a sense that there's more to this that I just don't understand, and then I just keep peeling back layers. That's what makes them so much fun.
Right.
Like as I was even scripting Mother, I was like, wow, this movie is getting better.
Yeah. So we're wrapping this one up. You can find us on pretty much any platform that you want to search your podcast on, like Apple Music and Spotify. We also upload these all to YouTube. So go ahead and join in on the comments if you want to leave us an email at nowthisispodcasting100@gmail.com. I love interacting. I reply to pretty much everything. So go ahead and give us your thoughts. If we did good, if we did bad, if you like our takes, or if you don't, just let us know. And thank you for listening to Now This Is Podcasting.